Now we're going to make some wreaths. The first thing that we'd like to talk about before we start making our wreaths would be wreath rings. Wreath rings come in a large variety of sizes, anywhere from 6 inches all the way up to 96 inches. So you really do have a variety to choose from, and you can give your customer the quality product that they would like to have. Just as a basic rule of thumb, one way that you can measure your rings is to either take a tape measure and measure straight across. This is a 10-inch ring. Another way that I could tell that this were a 10-inch ring without measuring would be to count the number of clips. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. When you're working with the clamp rings, it's very important to remember that the clamps are sharp, and when you're working with them, keep them stored clamp size down. The next size of ring that I have is a 12-inch ring, and that's what I'm going to be working on today. 12-inch clamp ring is the most common size, and your finished product can be anywhere from 22 inches overall to about 28 inches overall. The rule of thumb is generally 12 inches larger than the ring itself. So we'll leave this 12-inch ring up here so that we can work with it. And the last sample that I have to show you would be a 14-inch ring. Once again, I'll show you, you could simply measure straight across, and I have a 14-inch ring, or if I'm out in the shop and I need a ring size and don't have a tape measure, again, I can simply count the number of clamps. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Let me set these aside and we'll begin to work. Today we're working on the Mitchell Metal No Hammer Clamp Machine. The feature I love about this machine is that it has a nice large work table. I don't need a separate table to work on. Here at Northwoods, we also work on the Craftmaster quite often, which does carry the no hammer feature, but it's in a smaller table size. It's very portable and very easy to store at the end of your season. The next thing that we'll look at would be our boughs. I'm going to be working with fresh balsam evergreens today. Certainly you can use Scotch pine, white pine, Fraser fir, almost any bough that you have from out in the field to create a beautiful wreath. The general rule of thumb for cutting your boughs to size when you want to work would be 12 inches, 12 or 14 inches. And this really depends on what you want your finished overall size to be. Again, just like when we made the bows, we could certainly take our tape measure, measure out the 12 inches on our work table, make a mark with a magic marker, and then work from there. So let's imagine that I've marked 12 inches on my table, and I'll begin to cut. A couple of tips for when you cut your brush. You want to have the evergreens face down, and you want to cut from underneath. This alleviates any fatigue and hand soreness that you might have. So I've got my clipper, I'm going to hold it up under my bough, and I'm going to lay it on my table. I like to go in and cut that middle stick out, and then to cut my next piece I'll simply place it over the top of the first piece, so I'm cutting a very consistent piece of brush. And as I cut up the bough, I'm going to continue to cut the big stick out of the middle and simply lay the next piece on top of the first to make sure that all of my cut pieces are the same length. I've got this one here, he's going to be the same length, I'll give him a cut. And again, I'm simply working my way down the bough. When I have a big stick like that, I tend to not use that because what that'll do is stick up in your wreath later, ruining the look of your wreath. Certainly everything is aesthetics, and it's up to you what you'd like to do in your shop. We'll cut a couple of more pieces here, then we'll begin to assemble our wreath. Cutting that big stick out, and I'm able to use what was left. There, I have a nice pile of brush. When you're cutting your piles of brush, it's important that you keep them stacked nice and neat. That'll make it easier for you to work later on. All right, let's begin to assemble our wreath. I've got a 12-inch ring, and so when I'm finished, I would like to have approximately 22 to 24 inches finished. I'll take the clamps, I'll place them in the jaws of the machine, and then I'm going to take my foot, and there's a lever at the bottom of the machine, and I simply step down, and that closes the jaws of the clamp machine. Let's put a handful in, and we'll show that to you. I've got my handfuls upside down. When I begin to work, I'm going to place them face up, and I'm simply going to gather up a handful of brush. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you're gathering up the same amount of brush in each handful. Consistency is the most important thing when you're making a wreath. The other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that my handful is fairly systematic, it's fairly symmetrical. I don't have anything poking way out. When I'm done making my wreath, anything poking out now will poke out later, and it'll ruin the looks of your wreath. so I have a nice handful. I'm also making sure that I have my fingers tucked back out of the way, and I'm placing this into the jaws of the clamp machine. Then when I hit the foot feet and the jaws clamp around, they won't catch my fingers. I place the handful into the jaws of the clamp machine, and I want to allow my stick to be at least a half or 2/3 of the way through, nearest to the next clamp. I'm going to press the foot feet, and you can see the jaws of the clamp machine fold the metal rings right over like this. And this is a nice feature. You can see that the jaws of the clamp actually come all the way down so that nothing's poking out to hurt you later. The next step that I'll do is simply pick the ring up and place the next empty clamp rings into the jaws of the machine, and I'll put together one more handful of brush. Again, I'm gathering up a nice handful of bows. And it's also customary, you can even take the first couple of pieces of brush and pull them and give them kind of a staggered look. Again, I'm making sure that I have approximately the same amount of brush in the next handful that I had in the previous handful. That way I'll have a consistent wreath when I'm done. Again, my fingers are tucked back out of the way. I lay the handful of brush down into the clamp ring and depress the foot feet. So with a 12-inch clamp ring, I have 12 clamps. I'll repeat this process 12 times. This handful's a little light, so I'm going to grab my next pile of brush and just add to it because it's important that I have a consistent handful. Fingers tucked back, stems half to 2/3 of a way to the next set of clamps, and depress the foot feet. We talked before about making sure that our handfuls are consistent and nothing poking way out. I've got just a couple of little pieces here that I don't like, so I'm going to give them a trim. And that also really points out that when you're going through and cutting your brush, it's very important to cut them all the same length the first time. Again, fingers tucked back, brush placed in, and depress the foot feet. In the beginning, you may find yourself working a little bit slow, but don't become discouraged, because once you really get the hang of it and you know what you're doing, you should be able to create a 12-inch wreath, 22 inches finished overall, in about 5 minutes. And you just continue this process until you get to the end. We were using a clipper to cut our brush to the size that we wanted to use to make our wreaths. However, an alternative method to clipping your brush, which really can be pretty laborious, is to simply snap your brush. When you go to snap your brush, you want to make sure you have nice, fresh evergreens, and then keep in mind that a branch is really like our bodies. We can bend forward very easily, so the branch is not going to snap easily that way. What you want to do is break it against its back. So I'll lay the brush flat in front of me, and what I'm going to do is snap the brush in my hand. As I work my way down the bow, I'm actually creating the handful that I will put into the wreath. This saves a lot of time. So I'm simply going to snap the branch, and then just like we were talking, when you cut, you want the branches to be the same size. As I work my way down the bow, I'll lay the first piece on top of the second, and then I'll simply snap them, so I'm ending up with the same size pieces. Again, I just continue to work my way down the bow. You can see I'm working my way. Now, if I get to a part like that that doesn't want to snap, I don't wrestle with it. I go to a different place and snap it. And again, I'm simply going to continue to work my way down this brush. And as you can see, you're basically using all of the brush in your hand. Just like when we're cutting our brush, we want to make sure we have a consistent handful, and we also want to make sure we don't have big sticks poking up to ruin the looks of our handful. So as you can see, I've snapped my way through a couple of bows. I didn't have much waste. I have the handful in my hand ready to go. It's a time and labor-saving way to do things. So again, I'm simply picking through my handful of brush, creating a nice symmetrical handful that's the same size as the handfuls before it, placing them down into the clamp, depressing the foot feet. Now we're getting near the end of the wreath, and so what I want to do is show you how we're going to finish it off. In order to do that, what we need to do is pull the brush up from our first handful and tuck it around the side of the last clamp, just like you would tuck your hair behind your ear, so that you're able to get in and work that way. So the last couple of handfuls here, we'll do so you can see what we're doing. Again, I'm just simply picking up a nice handful of brush. Work it backwards, but that's all right. Nice handful, fingers out of the way, depress the foot feet, and now we're ready for that last handful. I've got the first handful tucked out of the way, the last clamps into the jaws of the clamp machine. I'm going to create that final nice little handful of brush to finish off my wreath. And I'm going to kind of pick up the brush from that first handful. And to tell you the truth, if you've created your wreath properly, then you can yank and pull on that first handful and it's not going to come out. If it comes out, it's a good thing it came out in your hand and not in your customer's hand. So here I've placed that handful in there. I've got it tucked under my first handful. I've got my fingers out of the way. I'm going to do press the feet, let them relax, and then take that first handful and just lay it right back over the top. So here we've got our finished product. Alrighty, we've got a few little wild and woolies on here, so we'll give those a clip. And you don't want to go too crazy on it because you certainly don't want it to look like it went through a cookie cutter. And there's our finished product. Happy wreath making. Another specialty item that we offer here at Northwoods Evergreen is our quick lock cemetery easel. Simply take your wreath, place the back of the wreath right over the top part of the quick lock, and pull the little knob up here, flip it around, and simply place it down in to lock the wreath right to the easel. And what I'm doing is just pushing that little metal clip right through the back of the ring. And as you can see, the wreath is on there nice and tight. Another nice thing about the quick lock easel is that it has these sturdy 3 prongs on the bottom. Once you stick it in the ground, it's going to stay there.